Hey, folks, good morning and welcome to another episode of Steelers Morning Rush. I'm Alan Saunders. It is Wednesday, April 30th, and we've got a great question here. We're going to do something a little bit different than the way I've been doing it. We'll see how this goes because I get a question from the audience. It was so good, I just couldn't take it. I couldn't not take it, I should say. And I think it's probably a good enough topic that I need to write a story about it for SteelersNow.com, but I haven't yet. Usually, when I have like a podcast that goes with a story, I write the story and then I record the podcast. But well, we're doing it the other way today. So let's let's find out if this let's see how this works, and then we'll go from there. So the question came on yesterday's Morning Rush, and it is a good one regarding George Pickens. So the question here is from Cliff, the Dark Knight. Cliff wants to know. Also, Cliff said happy birthday to my mom. So thank you, Cliff. Appreciate that. If the Steelers are trying to model their franchise in similar fashion to the Eagles, why wouldn't they extend GP, George Pickens, similarly to the Eagles extending Devonta Smith after acquiring A.J. Brown? What would a contract for GP look like? Great question. Something I have not seen anybody really try to answer. So I really appreciate the challenge, and I'm going to dive into it here on the podcast, and then I'm going to write about it, SteelersNow.com. So I'll answer the first part of the question first. I don't think that the Steelers have a philosophical issue with paying two wide receivers big money while they are not paying a quarterback big money. A lot of people think, oh, the Steelers don't do that. And because the Steelers didn't do that, because the Steelers had Ben Roethlisberger. And the idea of when you're paying a quarterback as much as they were paying Ben Roethlisberger is that he's not going to need top flight wide receivers. So when you look at a lot of these teams, the Bengals are an exception. Obviously, Joe Burrow, well paid. But like the Minnesota Vikings have two really good wide receivers, not necessarily the world's greatest quarterback situation. The Dolphins, two really good wide receivers. Now they're paying Tua a lot, but not necessarily the world's best quarterback position. The Buccaneers, to me, is a great example. Two really good wide receivers and a reclamation project that kind of gets you by in Baker Mayfield. So, like, you don't see the Chiefs on this list. You don't see the Bills on this list. You don't see the Ravens on this list, right? The outlier there is the Bengals, who have decided they're going to pay Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, and also no one on defense at all. We'll see how that works out for them. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. But so I don't think the Steelers would have any hesitation about signing a second receiver to a big-time contract while they are not paying a quarterback big-time money. Will they extend George Pickens? I think the Steelers have serious reservations about George Pickens, the teammate, and George Pickens, the person, not George Pickens, the football player, who's great. I don't think they want to spend a lot of money on someone that is going to hurt the team with penalties and continually be fined. And those fines, if they continue at the rate they've been coming, will eventually add up to suspensions and who knows what. I think that is 100% of the hesitation about signing George Pickens to a contract has nothing to do with his ability on the football field. So let's get into what a George Pickens contract would look like, with the big caveat that there is no good way to price in everything I just said about George Pickens, the person. All we can do is simply calculate what George Pickens, the wide receiver, is worth, and then say, well, it'll be about that, probably not more than that, maybe less, maybe significantly less. It just depends, right? Because part of this thing with George Pickens, like, I know the Steelers talked to the Cowboys during the draft. I know that happened. Diana Rossini reported it yesterday, but like, we kind of knew it was going to happen. It did happen, and then the trade didn't happen, right? The Steelers don't want to trade George Pickens. They cannot. Cannot's a strong word. It would be really, really difficult for the Steelers to get better by trading George Pickens. And so it's a bad move. They don't want to make it. It's very similar to the 49ers with Ayuk last year. They did not want to make a bad move that was going to make their team worse. The only reason Ayuk ever got close to being traded was that he forced the issue. And if Pickens does not do that, he will not get traded. Okay. But there's a difference between being traded and getting a contract extension, and just, keep that thought process in your mind throughout this. A couple of years ago, when the Steelers did their extension on Deontay Johnson, I did a study about what teams pay for in the wide receiver market. And although we have all of these metrics and stats and ways of tracking performance, probably more now than we did then, the number one thing that got you paid then was the total number of receiving yards. That was the thing that had the best correlation to the salary that you ended up eventually getting. Oh, and by the way, Jamar Chase just led the NFL in receiving with 1,708 yards and got the highest paid contract ever. Justin Jefferson happened to be second, 1,533. He's second. Brian Thomas and Drake London are both on rookie contracts. Amon-Ra St. Brown is fifth, 1,263. He's the fifth highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. CeeDee Lamb got overpaid because his quarterback got hurt, and you had DK Metcalf on a new deal there. Okay, so George Pickens, we know two things. One, the Steelers are going to sign him to be a wide receiver 2, right? So, like, you look at the high end of the wide receiver 2 deals. That's T. Higgins, $28.75 million a year. Jalen Waddle, $28.25 million a year. Devonta Smith, $25 million a year. Debo, technically, he actually makes more than Terry McLaurin, but it's just because of when the contracts were signed. 23.8. Mike Evans, 20.5. Okay, that to me is the high end of the wide receiver 2 price tag market. That's where you should expect, I would say, someone like George Pickens' talent to land in that top end. But statistically, because the Steelers never throw the ball, he doesn't really line up there. You know, he's 32nd in the NFL in receiving yards. Now, but like him and T. Higgins have pretty comparable seasons. Higgins was hurt a little bit more. He only played 12 games. Pickens played 9. Higgins had 911 yards. Pickens had 900. Higgins also had 10 touchdowns, while Pickens only had 3. But like they're not that far apart. Mike Evans played 14 games, 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns. Not that far apart. Now, obviously, the Steelers don't throw as much as some of these other teams, so the numbers are sometimes difficult to parse. Jalen Waddle, 15 games, 744. So, like, to me, that's the neighborhood, right? Those are the wide receiver 2s that you can compare George Pickens to. Waddle, Smith, Evans, Debo, Higgins. And all of those guys are making north of Samuel at the end, but Samuel also 29 when he signed this at 23.8. Well, actually, no, Evans makes less. Evans or I guess Evans makes less than Godwin. I don't know who you want to call the wide receiver 1 and the wide receiver 2. Those guys are actually pretty balanced. But 20.5 for Mike Evans is the lowest of that group. 22 for Godwin. So a George Pickens contract would probably, if you're just going on the talent of George Pickens, be somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 million a season. That's what Devonta Smith got. Higgins got 28. Waddle got 28. 28 wouldn't sound crazy to me. So I would say somewhere in that range would be what a George Pickens contract extension would cost. Again, accepting the field stuff. And I don't really have any way of knowing how to build that in. Obviously, it didn't hurt Tyreek Hill any when he signed his big contract with the Dolphins. So that's what a George Pickens contract should look like. Will the Steelers sign it? I don't know. I'm a little skeptical that he's going to get a contract extension this offseason. I think if the Steelers do decide to re-sign George Pickens, they're going to make him earn it on and off the field with another year. And I think, honestly, the Steelers are doing themselves and George, or have done themselves and George. Like, you can criticize George Pickens, the person, all you want. The Steelers have kind of dropped the ball with George Pickens, the player. Like, we don't really have any idea how good George Pickens can be. That's what happens when you play in an offense run by Matt Canada and you have very limited quarterbacks to go with you. But also, like, it's this double-edged sword, right? As if the Steelers had a great passing offense of scheme or a great quarterback, they would not be entertaining the idea of paying a wide receiver 2 that amount of money either. So, can't have it both ways. That's all I got for this morning. Great question. Love the question. Love it's a different topic than on and on about the draft again. And so I appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube platform. We'll see you with Smitty and Spencer Holbrook, who covers Ohio State, going to talk Jack Sawyer and Will Howard on the afternoon drive. Stay tuned for that, just about 6. Till then, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and enjoy.